Thank you all for participating in our service today. We are honored to be part of Women's History Month, celebrating women in our lives and in our world. Sorry, I've been drinking water all morning. I'm Rhonda Robinson, and I'm one of the founding sisters of Women's Circle. Our UUSG Women's Circle is in its 7th year. We have held 6 sessions each year, unbelievably, even during COVID, 40 different afternoons to invite guest speakers, talk about our spiritual development, be centered around creating a closer community. We continue to invite guests to suggest topics or come and speak. We have planned small group discussions, we've planned activities, all kinds of things from art to tromping around in the woods. We've found readings and videos gathered in the church and outdoors with lots of learning, laughs, tears, and of course, coffee and treats. I'm wondering if I could cajole you, if you have been to a Women's Circle session at all, would you raise your hands? Look at that. Aren't you surprised? It's amazing. What about if you've been on the Women's Circle planning team over the years? Another group. Okay, thank you all so much. A little review about how we started. Our recently departed, if you will, since she moved to Pittsburgh, member Trish Beckshord chatted with me one time about her experiences at one of our women's retreats. And she was suggesting that she hoped it could be broadened and add different topics and maybe have different activities. And as we talked about that, we decided that conversations with the women's retreat planners would be a good idea. And at those meetings together, we all discussed aspects of the retreats and considered the limitations they had of time and space. The retreat team encouraged us to develop something else, something new, with events taking place maybe more regularly, and for our UUSG women to continue to explore their spirituality and learn more about each other as well. And so we began to think about that. Trish and I began to organize, added others to a planning team, and move forward. Our focus has always been on the many definitions and aspects of spirituality. If you look up the word spirituality, you will be astonished at the number of definitions. And we wanted to also continue community building for the women in our church. Our first session was held in September of 2015, and we continue to gather right up to this month. Our current planning team is here today, helping do the service. But in addition to those presents, others in earlier years who have also been involved include Trish, of course, Susan O'Neill, Paige Porras, Maureen McCaw, and Glenda Peck. And I'm sorry if I missed anybody. We meet monthly to discuss and plan and develop our programs, and we do welcome encouragement and new ideas from the congregation, and maybe even from Reverend Scott. Women's Circle is just one of several UUSG community opportunities, many started and directed by UU women. So we salute others who have also started book discussions, Buddhist meditation, film showings, Bible readings, a myriad of activities. We are an engaged and active congregation who enjoy learning and sharing new ideas. And that's exactly what Women's Circle does as well. Our team today will each speak briefly about their involvement and appreciation of Women's Circle and perhaps a particular Women's Circle session that has impacted them and how it might relate to their spiritual path and the spiritual development of our congregation. So since I'm here, I get to go first. While I have attended just about all the sessions and have enjoyed and learned from each one in its diversity, I especially was moved by 2 sessions that we held walking the Labyrinth. For our first session, we borrowed a large cloth labyrinth from a church in St. Charles and spread it out in the former Geneva Public Library, kitty corner across the street. For our more recent Labyrinth session, we were invited to the Tao Center in Wheaton. Each time, We were asked to walk slowly, a few at a time, in dimmed light, opening to the experience and entering an almost transcendent mindset. For me, moments like this really did seem like a part of my spirituality, to be connected yet individual, to hear yourself and others in silence, to breathe deeply and let ideas come, to let light and life flow through me. Like many of us, it has always been hard for me to slow down and reflect quietly. Those of you who know me know I'm not that quiet. We have so many demands and so many responsibilities, but somehow walking that labyrinth was amazing to me, deliberately taking slow steps, staying silent, and mentally repeating a short mantra while pacing slowly through the steps of a labyrinth, coming to the center. Somehow that helped both settle and clear my thoughts and help me breathe more deeply. I certainly appreciated those opportunities. Since then, short meditations like Kim just gave and music especially continue to help me de-stress. All this has helped me to focus and develop spiritually. So thank you for all of that. Trish would be next if she were able to join us today. I will just say, because some of you don't know who Trish is, that she was a member of the church for quite a long time. She moved to be closer to family in Pittsburgh and is currently having some very serious situations with her health. So if you do know her, an email to her would be a great idea. Thank you.
What I'm going to do, I'm Pam Werner, I'm part of the women's planning team as well, but what I'm going to do first is read what Trish has written for this day, and then I'll follow up with my own comments about my own experience. So these are in Trish's words. As I have thought about it, it is hard for me to pick one favorite session in all of the Women's Circle events that I have participated in. When we started the program as a way for each of us to explore our own spiritual path through discussion and sharing, my biggest question was, what is spirituality? That, which was the topic of our second session, is perhaps, if I had to pick, my favorite. Not because I led it, but because pulling that session together allowed me to explore the thoughts of many other people. And I think that exercise, plus just the participation and sharing in the energy that all of the women bring to Women's Circle, has been absolutely wonderful. And I love that so many women have stepped up to explore and lead sessions, which has strengthened the cohesion of the group. So many wonderful participants. For me, Women's Circle has not only allowed me to better understand my own spiritual path, but it has also allowed me to share and build community with others on their own journey in the end. Women's Circle has built a wonderful sense of community for me at UUSG that I have not found anywhere else. I have learned that my sense of spirituality is the ability to meet and welcome people where they are and to support and share with them as we move forward on our separate but shared journey. It's a way of being in the world, of greeting the world, of moving through life together. Those are Tricia's words. And now these are mine. First of all, since it's Women's History Month, I want to honor my mother, and I'm going to say her name. June Frances Wittrup Renault Edson, and finally, Johansson. I was raised in Geneva. We never knew about this church. If we had, I believe we probably would have gone to it. But my mother had a sense of spirituality, but not religion. She had predictive dreams and spiritual experiences and encounters of which she shared about this much. Very little. But the thing is they guided me to know the truth of what our lineage is, because in my family, actually, it's pretty common for this experience. So at any rate, when I found UUSG, I was very interested in anything that was spiritual, but not particularly religious. And in talking this over with Trish, that's when I decided to join the Women's Circle planning team, so that to explore the issue of spirituality. And I presented at one point in time one session on dreaming, of which I've always had predictive dreams, and the women in my family have as well. So it was a topic I was very interested in. We did it on Zoom. Maybe, perhaps, if there's interest, maybe we'll do it when we can finally get together another time in a few years. But it was a good presentation, at least for me. And so that what I would say for me is my favorite, because I think dreams are very profound if we follow them. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Dameron, and I've been a member of the Women's Circle Planning Committee for about 2 years. I started attending UUSG when I moved to St. Charles in 2014, and I joined the church in 2017. I think it's easy to get a picture in your mind when you hear the words Women's Circle of some kind of quilting bee or something, but that's not what it is. If you can picture a large circle in the Commons room, 20 up to 40 women, all sitting down, each of us takes a turn to share and be seen as who we are and who and what we love and why. I feel at home in the group. My personal reason for attending the group has always been to get to know other women and maybe make a friend. Each session I learn some small tidbit about another person, and that transforms my perception of that person into a multidimensional, complex, and interesting person. Even shy introverts seem comfortable enough to share and commit to friendship. For friendship is a bulwark against stasis, a potential source of creativity and renewal in lives that would otherwise narrow with time. COVID has isolated and narrowed all our lives as though we're looking at it through the wrong end of a telescope. Interdependence and friendship can conquer the lonely, individualistic nature we seem to adhere to as Americans. We must commit to showing up, being in the moment, and most importantly, being seen and heard. Today, we are asked to provide pictures of the woman we would like to honor for Women's Month, and I have chosen my maternal grandmother, Ozie Fuller. She lived all 82 years of her life in Geneva, Georgia, not Geneva, Illinois, without indoor plumbing and only had electricity in the 60s installed. She raised 4 children during the Depression. She made delicious cakes using measurements of handfuls and pinches. She killed rattlesnakes with her garden hoe, and she treated all injuries with turpentine. She showed everyone in her family unconditional love and quiet fortitude. She is the reason I'm here in St. Charles, so that I can try to be the kind of grandmother she was to me, to my granddaughters. I'll finish with a poem by Mary Oliver titled Self-Portrait. I wish I was 20 and in love with life and still full of beans. Onward, old legs. There are the long, pale dunes on the other side. The roses are blooming and finding their labor no adversity to spirit. Upward, old legs. There are the roses, and there is the sea, shining like a song, like a body I want to touch. Though I'm not 20 and won't be again, but 70, and still in love with life and still full of beans.
Hello, My name is Kim Mcduffie. I've served on the Women's Circle Planning Committee. I've led a session on the pagan experience of the spring equinox, and I've been to all the women's retreats. I even got my start here at UUSG with the Women's Circle, or Women's Spirit Rising group. I actually get a hoot out of telling people I've been an irregular attender of UUSG since the 90s. And I'd like to share with you the story of how I first came to UUSG. In my 20s, I explored religion and spirituality as a personal life quest. I was a theosophist, a pagan, and I eventually began to identify as UU. I visited as many houses of worship and houses of the holy that welcomed visitors. I was in it for the beauty of the structures as much as the hush and awe that would come over me whenever I would brush up against the sacred. A dear friend invited me to come hear her read an original poem. If you know me, you know I love poetry, so I was in just because of that. She told me that her women's group had taken over the church and was leading the service at this tiny little church in Geneva, so I came to visit. And like good little pagans, she promised a romp in the woods. Have you ever been to the Geneva Grotto? Pure magic. So I fell in love with the church, the library across the street, the river down the hill, and yes, I was also very moved by my dear friend's poem. The service done by our women's group was magnificent, and so I began to regularly attend Women's Spirit Rising. Women's Spirit Rising was an oasis of sacred space in a very hectic world that I lived in. I have many treasured memories of walking through those common room double doors into a circle of silence, candlelight, and sacred intention. At UUSG, I found more than sacred space. To this day, the sunlight coming through those windows, the sound of our church bell, the smell of that chalice, it all invokes in me that same awe, that hush and awe. Words can't fully express it. At UUSG, I found a sacred community of women who have also inspired me and supported me. I don't have a favorite session of the Women's Circle. The opportunity to gather and commune with these women, that's my favorite. And I'm so thankful, truly thankful, to call UUSG my own. When I picked a picture of Peace Pilgrim. And the reason is this quote: "When I dedicated my life to be of as much service as possible, someone said to me sarcastically, 'What do you think you can do?' I replied, 'I know I am just a little person and can only do little things, but there are so many little things that need to be done in the world.' When I started my pilgrimage, I was asking for very big things. And someone said to me, 'You might as well ask for the moon.' But I answered, 'If enough of us little people ask together, even very, very big things will be granted.' And I can say to you, live in the present, do the things that need to be done, do all the good you can do each day. The future will unfold." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Slayer. This is my second year on the Women's Circle planning team. I joined because I have a deep interest in spirituality, and I wanted to be part of an exploration in how spirituality is interwoven in so many life experiences. Each month, we consider topics and issues that women typically share an interest in: religious, interreligious, non-religious, natural, moving, ordinary. Whatever stirs the heart is spiritual. The Women's Circle complements our Sunday services and our work in the wider community by helping open a sacred space within us and moving us to take action in ways that reflect the stirrings of our heart. As a reminder, our pledge dollars enable programs like this to flourish. We are grateful for the support of this administration and especially members and friends of UUSG that provide space, material, and funds to grow. I enjoyed facilitating our recent session about Indigenous spirituality. In the words of George Tinker, Osage tribal member, the essence of this spirituality, which is often taken out of context and romanticized, is this. Our whole culture and social structure was and still is infused with a spirituality that cannot be separated from the rest of the community's life at any point. All of the created world is, in turn, seen as alive, sentient, and filled with spiritual power, including each human being. There's an interrelationship of all creation, of two-legged, four-legged, wingeds, and other living, moving things, from fish and rivers to rocks, trees, and mountains. The Women's Circle attendees shared questions, engaged each other in discussion, and came away with a deeper understanding of the Native American culture of spirituality. And this experience is so valuable to us as we walk our own spiritual paths as UUs. I have a poem by Joy Harjo titled Eagle Poem. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments steadily growing and in languages that aren't always sound, but circles of motion. Like Eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky and wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born, and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like Eagle, rounding out the morning inside us, we pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Thanks.
I remember the first time I attended a women's circle session. I sat near the door, figuring if all the sharing got a little too intense for me, I could slip out unnoticed. I'm an introvert, and that is one of our superpowers. But I went because I knew it would be an opportunity to get to know some of UUSG's women better, make new connections, and perhaps gain some insight into spirituality. You see, at the time, spirituality was more of an intellectual pursuit than my own reality. It wasn't that I didn't believe there was more out there or that than that we could possibly know about. I do, but I'd never really felt a connection to the mystery, to the awe. Yes, I could get mesmerized watching crashing waves against rocks, and I oddly moved by a little chickadee looking for the perfect seed. And sometimes a poem will take my breath away, but did that really count? Well, to my delight and relief, I did not have to slip out of the first session nor any of the others. There was sharing, but it was honest and open, and I never felt I had to share. I could say as much or as little as I was comfortable with. It was a safe place. I did get to know people better. I became more involved and eventually joined the planning team. And then as I continued to attend sessions and contemplate topics and discussions, I came to suspect that perhaps I did have a spiritual side and that spirituality was not, I guess, what I grew up thinking it was. There were many, many forms of it. Trish's session on spirituality helped me a lot. I also recall one session that Susan O'Neill did, put together on yoga. I'd been doing yoga for years, and while it's just about the only exercise I actually enjoy, there wasn't much depth to my practice. But the yoga instructor began the session talking about the spiritual laws of yoga. Not everything she said made an impression, but enough of it did so that I began to put more thought and intention into my practice. I made it a ritual. It made a difference. Learning more about meditation helped me to get out of my own way, helped me to focus, helped me to try to get rid of a little of the clutter up there. Amanda's session on Indigenous Spirituality certainly has given me a great deal to think about. I began to see how spirituality could be about living creatively, thoughtfully, and responding to life with curiosity and an open mind. A sense of humor also helps. Creativity is not just about the arts. One can be a creative parent, creative chess player, or a creative barista. And for me, when I felt as I was writing, sometimes I would get to a point where I'm not really thinking, it's just coming, and I'm just typing, basically. And that, that's special. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe there was a little spirituality going on here. It's everywhere. It's in nature, relationships, work. In closing, I'd like to share a poem that was, for me, one of those take your breath away poems. I read it when I just finished a draft of a book where the painting in the book, which is central to the plot, happened to be the same painting that Mary Oliver was writing about. I know we've heard Mary Oliver before, but you just can't get too much Mary Oliver. After reading this poem, I went back and add a little more depth to my book, and I think her poem is especially poignant today. It's titled, Franz Marc's Blue Horses. I step into the painting of the 4 blue horses. I am not even surprised that I can do this. One of the horses walks toward me. His blue nose noses me lightly. I put my arm over his blue mane, not holding on, just commingling. He allows me my pleasure. Franz Marc died a young man, shrapnel in his brain. I would rather die than try to explain to the blue horses what war is. They would either faint in horror or simply find it impossible to believe. I do not know how to thank you, Franz Marc. Maybe our world will grow kinder eventually. Maybe the desire to make something beautiful is the peace of God that is inside each of us. Now all 4 horses have come closer, are bending their faces toward me as if they have secrets to tell. I don't expect them to speak, and they don't. If being so beautiful isn't enough, what could they possibly say?
I'm Julie Friesen, and as a member of the Women's Circle Committee, I'm both honored and annoyed that Reverend Scott invited the committee to facilitate today's service. And Reverend Scott, I know you're out there. When I heard about the first gathering of the Women's Circle more than 6 years ago now, I hoped to find connection with other women. My life at the time was completely absorbed with 3 boys, my husband and my 2 sons, who I loved deeply, but at times, I felt outnumbered, overwhelmed with sports events, sports laundry, competitive farting. There are rules for that, you understand. So September 26, 2015, I arrived, and if you know me, probably late, for the first Women's Circle. The common room was lined with chairs, and it was full. Maybe 40, 50 women sitting in a circle. And the sharing was amazing. There were some that I didn't relate to, true, but then there were some that I felt an instant resonance. It was powerful, authentic, and I felt part of something. There's that quaver in my voice. Sorry about that. I felt part of something larger in the company of women. I decided to return for more and eventually joined the planning team. A few years ago, I presented on self-compassion as a spiritual practice, mostly because I knew I needed to develop it. Researcher Dr. Kristen Neff was my source, and I was struck by her challenge to apply the same compassion that we strive to have for others to ourselves in simple and specific ways. I continue to benefit from it to this day, as it helps to counter my scathing inner critic. And I've been thinking about our themes today, and you'll hear my voice quaver again. Women's voices, history, spirituality, and community. And my mother, Shirley Friesen, I shared her photo today earlier. It might come up again. She's at the crux of all of these for me. As a kid, she made me go to church services every week, and she also had really fun things in her purse for me to play with, so that helped. She read devotionals at family dinners, in spite of our surly expressions. I can still actually visualize that booklet that she used. It was called Rejoice. And there was a time that she took a dream interpretation class. And that's led to her being our family guide for that lovely spiritual connection ever since. I'm so grateful. She talked about principles and faith, but mostly she lived them. And I appreciated how, in spite of our agreements and our disagreements, she was always interested in knowing more about what I thought and what I believed over the years. So, cheers to my 89-year-old kick-ass mom. I'd like to close with a quote from Julie Daly. The wisdom of women isn't clearly articulated, laid out analytically in a straightforward manner. Rather, it circles, curves, and winds its way around. It appears in the moment, if we're paying attention. It shows up in symbols and unexpected connections. Like the moon as it shines on the water at night, women's wisdom illuminates that which is unseen. We can be open to this wisdom, passed down from the women in our lives. What do you know? What has yet to be discovered? What wisdom is there, perhaps in the unseen, waiting for you?